Okay, we are live. Hi, this is William Ramsey. Welcome to William Ramsey Investigates. On today's show, a very special guest, returning guest. His name is Nick Bryant, Bryant. If you listen to my show, he was on it last year, and it was called, titled it The Epstein Justice. And this was in July 18th, 2025. So it was just like supposedly the files were there on Bondi's desk. Well, a lot has changed. These files have come out. Only 3.5 million of the 6 million. Blanche specifically said he left stuff out that involved CSAM, child porn, torture, and murder. So who knows what's in those files? There are rumors that some people have hacked them. I don't know. I haven't seen it yet. But Nick is back on the show. There's a lot to talk about. And there's his website. It's epsteinjustice.com. Check it out. I was reading through it today. A lot of interesting people, like a name that I remember she's involved from the Franklin scandals, Alicia Owens, who got put through the ringer, like in a most contradictory way, you would think, not in conformance with justice at all. And also Ellen Lachter, we were talking in the pre-show. I actually just reposted an interview with her. She's on the board or a board of advisors of Epstein Justice. I just reposted a show of hers with Viz from the Grassy Knoll about SRA, so people can go back and check that out. I highly recommend that. But Nick Bryant has written so many books. He's done a lot of different authors. He's written journalism. He's co-authored America's Children Triumph for Tragedy. He also wrote, like I mentioned, the Franklin scandal, a story of power brokers, child abuse, and betrayal. He's written or contributed a chapter on child trafficking, which is very pertinent to Epstein. He's also the co-author of Confessions of a DC Madam, The Politics of Sex, Lies, and Blackmail. He also wrote a book about Watergate. I think that's his most recent book. And his mainstream work has appeared in USA Today, Playboy Salon, The Twin Cities Reader, Vanity Fair, New York Gear, Gawker, The Sheer Post, and other publications. So he's been around for a long time. But his books, I was looking through them on Amazon today. They all have stellar reviews. So go check out those books. And also check out this website. It's still happening. We're talking in the pre-show that this Epstein is not going away. The Epstein files are very important. I consider them an extremely important event, the release of them, even through the massive amount of redactions. But Nick can talk more about that. So Nick, welcome back to the show.
It's great to be with you, William.
For people who may not have heard our last show, maybe you can talk about your involvement, Epstein, and this. I mean, it goes back to the Franklin cover-up, but also this kind of like network of abuse that's going on. And this is the Epstein files really reveal a network of massive abuse. And it didn't just involve young girls, which it did, but there's some stuff that I saw in there that involved children under 10. And I don't want to get too graphic, but it's in the civil litigation files. It's really, it's just shocking. It's just absolutely outrageous. But maybe you can talk about that and what led up to Epstein Justice.
I started researching a book that would ultimately become the Franklin scandal, a story of power brokers, child abuse, and betrayal in 2002, 2003. And I was pretty stunned when I came across that network because it had been so immaculately covered up by federal and state law enforcement. And it was just the antithesis of what I thought law enforcement should be doing. Law enforcement should be putting child molesters in prison for a very long time. But in the case of the Franklin scandal, it was the victims who refused to recant their abuse that were indicted on perjury charges. And Alicia Owen, who is an associate director of Epstein Justice, she was indicted on 8 counts of perjury, a state grand jury, and 8 counts of perjury from a federal grand jury. So she was looking at 200 years in prison. And she said, I was trafficked as an adolescent, and I'm not going to recant those accounts of abuse. And a kangaroo court found her guilty. Now we're talking a kid. She was indicted when she was like 20, been trafficked in her early adolescent. And she was sentenced to between 9 and 15 years in perjury, for perjury, a kid. And the authorities really tried to destroy her by putting her in solitary for nearly 2 years.
Wow. That's torture. Yeah, it's considered torture, I think, by the UN.
And so I wrote the Franklin scandal. I spent 7 years on it. I knew that it was a unique story, and it was a horrific story, and I felt like the bar had to be very high as far as journalistic integrity. And I spent 7 years on it, and I went about as deep into that reality as someone can go as a journalist. And we published the book in 2009, 2010, and it was a message that people didn't want to hear. They did not want to believe that the federal and state government of Nebraska covered up child sex trafficking. When you cover up a crime, you're aiding and abetting that crime. So people just did not want to believe that the government could possibly involve with aiding and abetting child trafficking. So the book got published, and we couldn't really get anybody to read it. And now on the internet, there were a number of people that talked about the Franklin scandal, but it had been enmeshed with shape-shifting reptilians and the Illuminati and things like that. And because I really worked hard at debunking what I thought was apocryphal too, about what's been going on with it as it's bounced around the internet. So that book came out, and the conspiracy theory or conspiracists, I use that word conspiracy theory. I don't really like it, but the conspiracists had their own version of the Franklin scandal that they embraced. That it did include shape-shifting reptilians and things like that. And then people that weren't conspiratorial at all just thought it was, they couldn't imagine it. No one in my family read the Franklin scandal. Well, actually, no one in my family reads any of my books. But so I was hurting from that. I'd put 7 years of my life into that. I'd made a lot of sacrifices. And about 2 years later, I had heard about Jeffrey Epstein molesting various girls in Palm Beach. And I'd also heard that a state grand jury declared that he hadn't molested a single child. So, and that's what happened in the Franklin scandal. So I didn't really want to check it out, but I knew so much about this realm at that point that I went down to Florida and started knocking on doors and doing the things that journalists do. And I ultimately got Jeffrey Epstein's black book, and it had all his addresses, or all his friends and their addresses and numbers. I could have called Bill Clinton. I could have called Mick Jagger. There's a lot of people I could have called when I got the black book. But when I got it, at the end of sections, it's massage, and that's his euphemism for underage girls mostly. And I started to call the underage girls, and the first conversation was kind of strange because I was talking to this girl's mother, and the girl was in the room, and she was relaying what I was asking, and her name was, well, I won't say her name, but she said that she had been trafficked by Jeffrey Epstein when she was 13 years old. And then I called up another woman who said that she'd been flown around and actually flown to an island. And at that point, I knew I was dealing with a network like the Franklin Scandal Network. And actually, Epstein, in many ways, is a carbon copy of the Franklin Scandal.
Did you find any overlaps of people involved in Epstein and Franklin?
I did not. Franklin was primarily Republicans molesting little boys, and Epstein is primarily Democrats molesting little girls. So that seems to be the partisan divide in our political system.
Right. So that was the big thing. And they actually mention it in the files. I'm trying to find the file right now, but like they were aware, Epstein, when you published that book through Gawker, right? Isn't that right?
Yes.
Where they were aware in the emails of that publication, and they knew it was redacted. I'm trying to find it right now. But have you seen that one email between
I
Epstein
did.
Yeah.
And Peter Thiel. Well, actually,
Right,
there was a initial email because I was down there, and once I kind of concluded that Jeffrey Epstein was running a trafficking network, I started to call his inner circle, and only one person answered, and that was Sarah Kellen. And I tried to talk to her, but she was telling me how mean the media had been to her. And Sarah was integral to the machine that destroyed all these children. She was Ghislaine Maxwell's right-hand woman. So I really wasn't able to commiserate with her. And I think she sensed relatively quickly that I wasn't able to commiserate with her. So that phone call didn't last very long. But then it came out in this latest tranche of documents that someone, and their name is redacted, sent an email to Jeffrey Epstein's inner circle warning about me, Nick Bryant. And they even had my picture that they were passing around. So I got a kick out of that.
Right. So you're in these files. It's
I am in the files, but in a good way. I'm one of the few people that are in the files with no shame in my game.
Right. And here it is. They're talking about the Gawker suit. This is 2016. And Jeffrey tells Thiel, I would have gladly shared your expenses for the Gawker suit. Chomsky Friday dinner if you are in New York. That's from Jeff to Thiel.
And actually, there's an email from Maxwell to Epstein saying that Gawker just published your address book.
I'm trying to find it. I have my files aren't in great organizational shape, but yeah, there is. You're right. I mean, they knew about you basically.
They did indeed.
Yeah. Here it is, right here. Found it. Gawker have printed the entire book, albeit redacted, I think is what it is.
We redacted the numbers of the adults, and we redacted the last names and numbers of the victims. We went about it ethically. There it is.
Yeah.
And it's funny. Someone was accusing me of being in the CIA the other day on social media. And I said, would a CIA guy publish Jeffrey Epstein's black book unredacted? And by that point, I had flight logs too, and we didn't redact the flight logs. So it seems to me that would be counterproductive for someone in the CIA to do that.
Yeah, I get the intel accusation too. I wouldn't last in the CIA, guys. Anyway, yeah, just these that you're in there, and then there's just so many connections and revelations. Like it must have like a curtain rolled up, and it's like for you to see the way that it was presented to the public as Jeff is just a lone pedophile, and I think that was it. Like, hey, he's a pedophile, now he's gone. And that's it. But that's not the case. He was in communication with so many people. And he was really almost like a social media overuser or something, like texting and sending stuff and on iMessage and things like that. I mean, did you find that to be the case in the files?
Well, the thing about Epstein is you got to keep in mind that I've been investigating him since 2011. And I knew about the sadistic pedophiles, and I also knew that there were girls under the age of 10 that were trafficked. So this information, I mean, there has certainly been information that's been revelatory to me, but this information that I've just disclosed was not revelatory to me because I knew that was part of the network. And with the Franklin network, we saw that too, extremely sadistic pedophiles. And the two guys that ran the Franklin network, Lawrence King and Craig Spence, they liked pubescent boys, but if you wanted a 7-year-old or an 8-year-old, they'd give you a 7-year-old or 8-year-old. And the same was true with Maxwell and Epstein. People that traffic, especially children, and generally people that just traffic other people are psychopaths. They do not have a moral barometer. They do not have compunction. So if you want a 7-year-old or an 8-year-old, they'll be more than happy to give you what you want.
It's in there, guys. We haven't seen all the files, and some of the stuff that kind of seeped through is very disturbing. There's like They were filming under 10, according to the allegations in one civil case, filming young 5-year-old C. Sam at the mansion in New York. That's just one thing that came through. So it's probably even worse. Like, there's all kinds of code words they were using at Zorro Ranch and statements. So it's very, very dark. There was one of the interesting things that I saw in the files that I found interesting was somebody's statement where Jeff had no conscience. Like, he didn't have like no guilt. He had zero guilt. He didn't feel guilty about anything he did. It's just like you said, psychopath is the right word. I think it's the right word. Like, these people are psycho.
And that's why it's so hard to understand them in a way, because the life that they live is the antithesis of the life that most of us live. Most of us are constrained by our conscience, and we feel guilt and we feel shame. But people like that, they don't feel guilt. I mean, they're not constrained by their conscience. And I've been writing about them for a number of years. But even the Epstein files, there were some things that kicked me in the gut that kind of took me by surprise. And I thought to myself, wow. There was Mark Tramo was a UCLA neuroscientist, and he had an MD and a PhD, and he wrote an email to Epstein about how to optimize an infant's sucking ability. And that was kind of a gut punch right there. I just went like, whoa, an infant. So these people are twisted, and I'm glad that Mark Tramo will no longer be with UCLA.
Oh, really? So he's not working there anymore? He's done?
He's done.
Wow. This has been kind of a global conflagration because a lot of people have been filing. This actually has geopolitical consequences too.
Oh, big time geopolitical consequences.
Can you talk about that?
Well, Jeffrey Epstein was an arms dealer, and he and Ehud Barak, the psycho Bobsey twins, they did an arms deal in Mongolia, and the people that Jeffrey Epstein got to take part in that arms deal, like the foreign prime minister of Ehud Barak is the former prime minister of Israel, but they got the former prime minister of Australia, the former prime minister of Norway, who actually tried to kill himself when he found out about his name being in the Epstein files. But Epstein was able to put these types of people together, and he did that to work out the arms deal with Mongolia. And they sold a heavy-duty surveillance system to Ivory Coast, the dictator of Ivory Coast. And there was a UN embargo on anything that had to do with arms or surveillance against Ivory Coast. But then Ehud Barak came to New York, and Epstein had like a bunch of luminaries awaiting him, and they were able to get that embargo from the UN retracted so they could sell that. So essentially they could sell Big Brother to an African dictator. And they did the same thing in Nigeria. So yes, definitely, Jeffrey Epstein was influencing geopolitical movement.
Right. And they were talking about Ukraine, his investments and things like that. This is from the 2007 docs. But this guy, Pivar stated Epstein does not always tell the truth and lacks a guilt gene. Epstein is not a good person, describes him as a contrarian. So, that's an old one. But yeah, there's just a lot of stuff. I wish I could find this Tramo one. I saw that.
Yeah, that one is chilling. I've been subjected to this type of material for a very long time, but I found the Tramo email to be chilling.
And there's others from the civil litigation of like women or girls, teens saying I'm a baby incubator and where's my baby and things like that. That's from the civil litigation files. Where are those children? And why did Jeffrey have a what do you call it? One of those like scopes you use when women are pregnant. He had that in his office. Like, wow. Like, is it so that they can get these like sonar of the infants and then they don't have to report them because there's no medical, they're not in the medical system, right? Because there's not they're not taking him to a doctor. Is that how dark it was? Do you
Well,
think?
actually, there were a number of doctors in Jeffrey Epstein's uh, within his circle. So having a doctor, getting MDs weren't an issue. Virginia Giuffre told me that a very sadistic pedophile put her in the hospital for 3 days, but there would be no record whatsoever of her being in the hospital.
Wow. So that's how deep the network was.
Lots of doctors. Lots of doctors.
Yeah. Rest in peace, Giuffre. She said she would never commit suicide.
I wrote a pretty protracted article about her. It's on my blog. You can go to nickbryantnyc.com or epsteinjustice.com. And I knew Virginia, and she had been through horrible abuse. Her father started sexually abusing her when she was 6 years old, and then he farmed her out to a friend of his when she was 8. And then she was put into a very draconian institution when she was 12 years old, which she ran away from repeatedly, and ultimately ended up as a minor on the streets of Miami. And she was eventually came into the gravitational pull of a pedophilic pimp named Ron Eppinger. And Eppinger rented a apartment, and then pedophiles would come in day and night and molest Virginia. And then Eppinger realized that the feds were on his track or on his tail, and he gave Virginia to a friend of his. And ultimately, what happened there was the FBI did a pre-dawn raid on that guy, and Virginia was in bed with him. And then Virginia's father was kind enough to let Virginia back into the house. And then shortly thereafter, he worked at Mar-a-Lago as a maintenance man, and he got Virginia a job at Mar-a-Lago, and that's shortly thereafter she met Ghislaine Maxwell. And with Maxwell and also Epstein, they didn't have to condition her. That's really important. And this came up in the Franklin scandal, because you cannot take a kid off the streets and just throw them into a room with a senator or a billionaire or someone in the cabinet. They have to be conditioned. They have to be taught deference. And Virginia had already been through all that. So it was easy for Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein to start pimping her out. And she had been through a lot of trauma, but she was a supernova, the way that she took on the pedophile formerly known as Prince Andrew, and also Ghislaine Maxwell, and went up against her reptilian lawyers. But ultimately what got her was her husband was beating her up. And the year before she died, she had tried to commit suicide a couple of times. And there's that one picture of her on the internet where she's really battered and bruised. And it was said that it was an accident between a car and a bus, but actually that her husband did that to her.
Oh, wow.
And he was able to get control of the kids. And Virginia really prided herself on being a very good mother. And I think that her husband's abuse was just the critical mass of trauma where she couldn't deal with life anymore.
She just started off trauma like from a very early age.
6 years old.
Yeah. I remember the whole Eppinger thing. Like, because I read her bio, not the most recent book, but her biography that was in the Maxwell file. She also sued Dershowitz.
Yes.
Do you know the outcome of that case? Because it went all the way till he almost got deposed, and then it got taken out of the court system, which
Virginia was pressured to recant Dershowitz's abuse. And I know who pressured her, but it would be difficult for me to say because I don't have the requisite proof. But she was pressured to recant her accounts of abuse with Alan Dershowitz.
Right. She said, I think that 6 times she was with him at Zorro Ranch too, if our memory serves me correct. So he was around, and she was trafficked to, according to her, Dubin, Mitchell, him, Robert. I think Robertson, who was the governor of New Mexico.
Bill Richardson. And also Bruce King, who was also the governor of New Mexico.
Oh, wow, both. Wow. See, so the network had that power. Mitchell, for people who don't know, he was involved in the Israeli-Palestinian negotiation peace process. So, like, you have this guy who they have dirt on, and there he is. Like, you can go look at the peace process. He's sitting down with Bibi, Clinton, and the representative from the PLO, and here he is involved in the Epstein network. It's just absolutely incredible.
And he was also a majority leader, a Senate majority as a Democrat. So he was. If the president goes, and then the vice president goes, and the Speaker of the House goes, then you have the president pro tempore, who is the ranking person in the Senate.
It's just incredible. Like, Virginia Roberts is like a world historical figure. Like, it's incredible. Just a really tragic, horrible life, and it's really a shame. Like, but she's right there in the mix with all these people. And there's pictures of her at those parties in France where she's like 15 with Epstein. It's like, it's incredible.
She was quite like I said, she was a supernova that burned and shone a lot of evil.
Evil, yeah. Prince Andrew to me is a very evil person, and she sued him. So she has more courage than a lot of men, that I know, to her credit.
I don't call him Prince Andrew anymore. I call him the pedophile formerly known as Prince Andrew.
Yeah, you're right. The first royal member arrested in 400 years. Wow. And pay out, well, I think the 12 million pounds, I think was what was paid out, if I remember. Out of
it was, his mommy bailed him out. It was a pretty hefty sum.
Yeah, I bet no more. What did he like? He had a certain arrangement of his 72 stuffed animals. He had to have them arranged on his
teddy bears. He was in it, and the butlers or house managers or whatever that didn't arrange the teddy bears exactly like he liked them would get excoriated.
The nickname for him was the CUNT. That's what the workers at the residences. Have you ever seen that one video of what they called him behind his back? I guess he was a real
he did not endear himself to the people that worked for him.
Right. But I mean,
to see him after he got arrested. Unfortunately, he didn't get arrested for child abuse. He got arrested for giving Epstein military secrets. But the terror in his eyes is the terror of someone who has been above the law his entire life and doesn't think he's ever going to get arrested. That was the terror in his eyes.
Yeah, that picture, that whoever snapped this picture is probably going to get like a Pulitzer or something, because here it is. Like, he looks completely freaked out. Just super privileged guy.
There he is. Yeah. I'm above the law, but not now.
Yeah, your brother let you go, man. So, wow. And this he's pictured with like a young child, and somebody's done research on this girl, and they think it might be this girl who disappeared from Ukraine. So you see this kind of trafficking, like they don't have her face. Like there's intrepid researchers on this like case, but this girl right here may be some girl who went missing off the street in Ukraine. And that is not that's a prepubescent child. Like, that's a child. So this is just one example of how depraved. Some of the other like statements about this guy involve like human hunting and torture, and like he's really bad news, like really bad. So this is just one of many. Like, wow. And how one of the interesting things that I found in the files is that his wife, or former wife, Ferguson, Fergie, said, she said she sent an email to Epstein to congratulate him about his baby or something like that, and then said, you used me to get to Andrew. So I think she sensed that Epstein was kind of an influence op or something like that.
Yeah, I saw that email. And
Yeah.
the thing is, one of the reasons why Virginia Giuffre split is they wanted her to carry a baby.
That's right.
And I think Epstein was probably cloning himself. I mean, we're talking the boys of Brazil.
Right.
Except this would be the boys of Coney Island. And it's pretty easy to clone a mammal or any animal. It's you just need the ovum. You take the DNA out of the ovum, which is pretty easy. You insert the DNA that you want into the ovum, and then you give it an electrical charge, and that'll start the mitosis process. Sometimes it doesn't, sometimes it does. But when Dolly the sheep was cloned, I think in 1996, and that was before I got into all this crazy stuff, I thought to myself, there's got to be some rich megalomaniacs out there that are cloning themselves.
Sure enough, that was his thing, like the ranch. Did you hear anything about this whole cryobank stuff that he had his genetic material stored in a cryobank? Did you come across that?
I have not come across that, but Juliet Bryant has said that she was at the ranch and she went into some kind of unconscious state. And when she came to, there was a doctor harvesting her ovums. She has said some other things that are pretty wild. That the experience has definitely taken a toll on her. So people can believe her or not.
Right. I actually talked to her biographer about her book. I think it was Blue Butterfly. So she was one. But the stories of the Zorro Ranch, somebody in the chat wanted to know your opinion of like Zorro Ranch and what goes, because there's more. Like the state, for people who don't know, the state of New Mexico actually they actually are doing research and an investigation. They set aside $2 million to look into the Zorro Ranch and actually have like cadaver dogs out there. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, Bill Richardson, who was the New Mexico governor for 2 terms, and Bruce King, who I also believe was the Mexico governor for 2 terms, they were both compromised by Epstein. Epstein didn't even have to register as a sex offender when he was in New Mexico. So, and Zorro Ranch is very remote. Who knows what was going on at Zorro Ranch? I mean, I don't think it's positive and would be beneficial to humanity.
Right. But it's a strange property because it's a private land. It's a huge thing surrounded by another ownership. So it's like in the middle of there's no other residences nearby to my understanding. And there was weird things. And there was a statement in there that it had an incinerator. And that's from a local cop. He called the FBI in 2019 or 2020 and said that like, hey, there's some sus stuff going on at Zorro Ranch. And so, and I don't know if you know this, but there was one of the pictures I came across from Zorro Ranch was of a young girl. It turns out she was from Brazil. And that, when I posted that picture on X, it had like 6 million views because something in the writing was Brazilian Portuguese. And it took, because it was a kid show in Brazil, and it took off in Brazil because Jeff was holding her hand like he had bagged like a fox, like an animal or something. He was holding her like captured prey or something. It was really strange, but it was I had a huge response to it because it was at Zorro Ranch and it was a girl who was redacted. Like, I don't even know who it is, but I assume she's from Brazil. And there's a lot of writing from Brazil. That's one of the other elements of the geopolitics or the global culture of Epstein, is that so many people from different countries are writing about it in different ways. There's like this guy Lang in France. There's people in Germany, Andrew, UK. You mentioned the Prime Minister of Norway. Brazil, it's just really astonishing that they're not.
And 2 of the Epstein colluders, co-conspirators, actually played an integral role in the Oslo Accords.
Oh, is that right? Which ones were that?
The ones that were going to bring Israel and Palestine together. That didn't really work too well.
Right. The Oslo Accords didn't amount to anything, right? I mean, it was just kind
No,
of
it was you had a couple compromised Norwegians that were
well,
integral to it.
and that's it. It's like this either the sub rosa network, like because it's similar to the Franklin scandal because the Franklin scandal involved child trafficking, but there was also criminality involved, right? Like savings and loan. It was the savings and loans era too.
Well, yes, well, one of the pimps. There were two pimps in the Franklin scandal: Lawrence King and Craig Spence. And King busted the Franklin credit union out for $40 million. And I believe that a lot of that money went to the Contras.
Oh wow!
Because there was a time when our shadow government, or whatever you want to call it, was funding the Contras, and we didn't have the mechanisms put in place. I believe that Secord or one of the people that involved went to a sheikh and got $1 million or $2 million or something like that. And I believe that a lot of the Franklin money went there. And then ultimately they set up Iran-Contra, where they were able to sell arms to Iran that were heavily marked up, which would support the Contras.
Interesting. So some of that money went out. Wow. And that was just, I mean, for people who were young, they didn't know that era, but the savings and loans were rife with corruption and looting, and they had a huge thing. You know, these guys were doing crazy deals and stuff like that. They knew they were never.
Actually, there was a book written by Pete Bruton. He's a former Houston Post journalist, and he hooked up a lot of the savings and loans that got busted out to the CIA.
Wow. So it's just like an intel op or something like that. Wow. So how has these drops, the drops that occurred late last year and then on January 30th, how have these drops affected Epstein justice and the work you're doing there?
Well, we hope that when you have a pathology, you go through three phases. You've got awareness, you've got acceptance, and you've got action. At this point, everybody is aware of Jeffrey Epstein. And I should say just about everybody and what he was up to. I think that these documents, this latest tranche of documents, are giving them acceptance of how evil it was. And what we need is a critical mass of acceptance, and that will create the sea change for action. Because we have to, I think Epstein, right now, our legislators they've been destroying the middle class for a very long time, and the middle class is disintegrating. And if things are allowed to go the way that they are, the wealth polarization is just going to be even much more extreme than it is now. And you're going to have basically the slaves and the slave owners. And I'm being a little facetious there, but I think that's where we're headed as a society with the wealth polarization and the disintegration of the middle class. So I think that this will be the best opportunity in our lifetimes to fix our government, because I don't think we're going to have an opportunity like this in our lifetime. We might not ever have another opportunity like this to fix our government before our leaders take us off a cliff.
Yeah, I mean, they need to release the other files. Like, wow. Like, I mean, one of the interest. Yeah, go ahead.
Here's the thing: we don't even need the files. We didn't even need these files. We know who the recruiters and procurers are, and if our Department of Justice had the will, they would call the procurers and recruiters before a grand jury, and they would be indicted on multiple counts of child trafficking, and that's a heavy sentence in the federal system. That's 15 to life. And you put these women, you give them, if they're staring at 10 life sentences, they're going to roll over on the perps in a heartbeat. And then our government is going to have to protect the witnesses that testify against the perps. So, and we can do that. We've done it with the mafia a bunch of times. That's exactly, it's a RICO case. And actually, in this latest tranche of documents, Sarah Kellen, who I talked about earlier, who was the right-hand woman of Ghislaine Maxwell, who knows the whole network. She knows which politicians are compromised, which politicians aren't. She knows that network very well, and she wanted to make a deal with the feds for a non-prosecution agreement, and the feds didn't make that deal because they were busy covering this up.
Right. It's incredible. She remarried. She has a different name. I think she married some guy who's like a race car driver or something like that. So
her name was Sarah Vickers. I think that they've had some acrimony in their matrimony. So I don't know if they're still together.
I feel like that happened to a lot of people. Like a lot of people got divorced over this thing. Like I know one was a guy from Hollywood, Josephson. Like his wife was shot.
He was a scumbag.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a total scumbag. And one of the emails, Epstein's setting him up with a 16-year-old, and the girl's mother is selling her to Josephson. And then in another email, Josephson's talking about how can we get rid of the poor people? Not how can we get rid of poverty, but how can we get rid of the poor people? And you see that social Darwinism in the emails. It's very explicit. It's very obvious that the Epstein class wants to eradicate the proletariat class.
Right. And they're doing all kinds of financial skullduggery. Like, how did the Zorro Ranch win the lottery? There's like
yes.
How did that happen? Do you know?
Well, that happens when governors get compromised.
Right. So they win the money, and then the money gets redistributed to these guys you mentioned, Bruce King and Richardson, right? So I mean, I'm not saying that's what actually happened, but that's how it could work. But and then it goes in, like, I don't think the forensic kind of accounting has really seen how the money flows for the trafficking really took place, like at a very concrete level. Have you seen anything like that? Like how much money they were generating out of their human trafficking?
I don't know if the human trafficking generated a lot of money. Same thing with the Franklin scandal. I don't think that human trafficking generated a lot of money. What it did generate was a tremendous amount of power because it compromised people. And the trafficking was about power much more than it was about money. And I interviewed a blackmail photographer for the Franklin scandal, and I was trying to get my head around it because before I wrote the Franklin scandal, there wasn't a lot of books about what I was writing about. And I asked him, how does this work? And he said, once you're compromised, it's like you're on a yacht. And it's a beautiful yacht, and it's a beautiful day. And you can have anything you want on the yacht. But if you decide to get off the yacht, the people on the yacht are going to make sure that you drown.
So you're like bound to it. Wasn't that a known kind of guy? I forgot what his name was, but he was out of Colorado. He was like a photographer. So I forgot his name.
Actually, his name was Rusty Nelson.
Rusty Nelson, yes.
He was from Nebraska.
Nebraska, okay. Because somebody's taken a lot of these pictures. There's a lot of photographic evidence, somebody was taking tons of pictures. And some of this is like early cell phone stuff. So somebody had to have a camera. Like there's pictures of Mandelson and Brunel and Epstein and Wexner together from like right at the turn of the millennium. Like there's just tons of pictures, a lot of porn, a lot of videos that were totally redacted. Like this redaction job was immense. Like the cover-up's immense, guys. There are there's like hundreds and hundreds of people from the DOJ redacting a lot of this stuff right from the beginning, right from February or March. So Bondi had her assignment. This is before the EFTA was passed. So before the Epstein Files Transparency Act, Trump and the administration was redacting, right? Are you aware of that?
Yeah, no, I've got no doubts about that.
Yeah. I mean, it's just such a huge cover up. There's so many people involved, and it just pervades the whole system. You don't know where all this blackmail is, and all these, you know. He was really kind of like a master criminal. He was a market manipulator. He had 5 years of a drug investigation. You talked about arms trafficking, child trafficking, infant trafficking. Like there's almost no kind of nefarious, and there's allegations of hitmen being like, you know, taken. He's in Mexico and Juarez. Like it's just off the charts. Like there's a full criminal empire. I don't think there's any doubt about it. I think that's what the Epstein Files network or files show, is that the criminality, like it's corrupted the whole system. Would you agree with that?
Our political system is very corrupt, as I said earlier, and a lot of people are compromised. I think that there's three trends that are going on which have completely dissociated Americans from their political system. You've got what I think is the false right-left dialectic, where you've got Republicans thinking the Democrats are mentally ill, and you've got the Democrats thinking the Republicans are mentally ill. So that's a pretty easy divide and conquer right there. And people have fallen prey to that, and they don't even realize. I met a woman in New York. I live in New York City, and she was a Republican, and she felt like the only solution was a two-state solution. I mean, that's how crazy people have gotten about that. And Americans have been conditioned to believe that they cannot affect change. And then, so you've got those two things, trends superimposed on each other. And then the next trend that's superimposed on each other is many of our politicians are compromised. So when you end up with those three trends superimposed on each other, you can see a government covering up child trafficking. 20 years, our government's been covering up child trafficking. And when you cover up a crime, you aid and abet that crime. So right now, our government is aiding and abetting child trafficking. Right, as we speak, our government is aiding and abetting child trafficking.
The network might still be going. Like some people have accused.
There's multiple networks.
Yeah.
It's just not the Franklin network and the Epstein network. There are multiple networks that play. And people approach me. I mean, I've written so much in this area that I'm kind of a lightning rod, and people are telling me about this network or that network. And unfortunately, I'm one guy, man. I cannot investigate what a lot of, and some people are very sincere, and I believe them, but I just don't have the time to investigate their allegations. And it's frustrating to me. I mean, a lot of times they understand, but then other times they get very angry at me.
Right. What can you do? I mean, I think there's kind of like a team effort, kind of like a decentralized people looking at it at their own, in different aspects, their own. Well, and I think it's clearly the way that they release the files is like a cover up in itself, because it's so scattershot, and the search functions like from 1980s, like something from Radio Shack, just totally crazy. It's just 10 responses at a time. It's lunacy. Nick, do you have time for a few questions? We're at the 50-minute mark.
Yeah.
I mean, I think somebody asked.
Go for it.
There it is. What's Nick's thoughts on Zorro Ranch? Is that the big black hole in this sick, sad story? I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, we kind of talked about it. And here's the thing with Zorro Ranch. The people that aided and abetted Jeffrey Epstein have had 6 years to clean out Zorro Ranch. So we're not going to find anything incriminating. Even if there is an untainted investigation into Zorro Ranch, it's been cleaned out. We're not going to find anything incriminating at this point.
Facts only asks, is there anyone left in government who can hold these people accountable, or is it all corrupt? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, it's corrupt, but I would suggest that your audience check out EpsteinJustice.com. We are a grassroots movement. We are growing and growing. As I said earlier, this is going to be the best opportunity in our lifetimes to reverse a horrific trend in our government, of our government essentially declaring war on Americans. And the reason why they're declaring war on Americans, many of them, some of them are social Darwinists, but many of them are compromised, and some of them are compromised and they're social Darwinists. So we, the people right now, we have to come together. I believe the right and the left are so divorced right now that I believe the only thing that can bring us together is children shouldn't be molested with impunity, and the government shouldn't aid and abet child trafficking. I think we can all agree on that. And that's what we have to come together, regardless if you're right, you're left, regardless if you're Jewish or Christian or Muslim, regardless if you're black or white. This is something that we can agree on, that the government should not be aiding and abetting child trafficking. And with Epstein Justice, we're growing. It's been slow. As I said earlier, there is those three trends that I talked about, the right and the left, just completely polarized. Americans have been conditioned to believe that they can't affect change, and then many of our politicians are compromised.
Right, and you've done live webinars too, right?
Yes, we do. We do live webinars. If you get involved with Epstein Justice, we can give you lots of stuff. We're forming Facebook groups by state to pressure legislators, but we have to make a stand here. We have to make a stand. We have to make sure that our government no longer covers this up, and we have to make sure that it never happens again. And I think we are battling for the soul of our country right now with Epstein. We are battling for the soul of our country.
I think you're right. I think it's that serious, like super profound. Like, are you going to allow people to compromise and blackmail? How much of this stuff has affected our foreign policy decision to go Iran, who's been promoted into positions of power? Like these are all very important, and go back to Epstein. Bart asked, when did the Epstein abuse and trafficking begin? How far back does it go? It's often generational. So who made Jeff Epstein? Do you have any thoughts on that?
When Jeffrey Epstein was asked during a deposition whether or not he'd been molested, he got very uncomfortable. He comes from a blue-collar family. His father was a gardener for the city of New York. And I don't know exactly where Jeffrey Epstein became Jeffrey Epstein, but there are certain nexuses that are possible. But with him, I don't know if he was molested or if he's just a natural born psychopath. But I think Epstein's trafficking goes back to the early 90s. And the Franklin scandal was primarily in the 80s, and it was covered up in the late 80s, early 90s. And it was a bigger network than Jeffrey Epstein's network. It was substantial. But Jeffrey Epstein's network was around for, I think, about 25 years. And so I think that both networks probably destroyed the same number of children. And the kind of sexual abuse that these kids had to endure is, some of these pedophiles, as I said earlier, were just really vicious, psychopathic human beings. And for someone to come back from that, it's going to require a lot of work on their part. And our government is responsible for their abuse because Epstein should have been stopped. Well, he was first reported in 1996, but he should have been stopped in 2006, 2007. So all those kids that were molested after the sweetheart deal in 2008, that's on our government, for sure.
Yeah, there's a lot. The abuse continued all the way up until his arrest,
Yeah.
July 2019. It's really just off the charts incredible what they got away with for that long. I mean, and I think you see times where he was like, he had to have connections within the legal stuff, Acosta and that whole thing. He's Intel, and he had great lawyers like Dershowitz and these things like that. Starr.
It wasn't his lawyers though. I mean, Dershowitz and Starr, you know, they're scumbags and they're good attorneys. But with Alexander Acosta, the Southern District of Florida drafted a 60-count indictment against Jeffrey Epstein. Count 51 was child trafficking. As I said earlier, that's a heavy sentence in the federal system. It's 15 to life. So that would have been the end of Jeffrey Epstein. But then Acosta was told to stand down, even though the feds had drafted a 60-count indictment. And there's only two people in the government that can tell a U.S. attorney to stand down. One is the Attorney General and one is the President. I mean, it can be delivered by a minion of the Attorney General or the President, but it has to emanate from the Attorney General or the President. And at that point, Alberto Gonzales was the Attorney General. And Alexander Acosta, as a U.S. attorney, he's not going to go out on a limb and cover up an international child trafficking network by himself. He's never going to do that. And Alberto Gonzales isn't going to do that either. He's not going to unilaterally cover up a international child trafficking network unless he's told to by his boss. And I believe that the order to cover up Jeffrey Epstein in 2007, 2008 emanated from George W. Bush. Wow. At the apex of our political system.
Right. Do you think that the CIA was involved with Epstein at all, like garnering intel and getting information, blackmail?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
I've got no doubts about it. Yeah. It's funny. The New York Times came out with an 8,500-word article, and they deployed 8 New York Times journalists that came to the conclusion that Jeffrey Epstein had no connections to intelligence. And they conveniently forgot that Jeffrey Epstein was in business with Adnan Khashoggi, who was the primary arms dealer for the CIA with Iran-Contra. And they also didn't mention that Stan Pottinger was selling arms to the Iranians when him and Jeffrey Epstein were in business together. I've got no doubts that Jeffrey Epstein was intelligence. Some dark, and when I say CIA, I mean there's good people in the CIA. There really is. I've met some good people in the CIA, but there's some dark, malignant corner of our intelligence that's pure evil.
Totally agreed. Nick, we are at the 60-minute mark. Is there anything else you'd like to add? Anything I missed? I mean, we got Epstein Justice right here. People go sign up for the newsletter. I'll put a link to the website in the show notes.
Fantastic.
Is there anything you'd like to add?
It's a beautiful day in New York, and I want to go eat some ice cream. So I think it's a wrap.
It's a wrap, yeah. Check it out. Check out his books, Franklin Cover-Up. We mentioned that. The DC Madam, one on Watergate as well. I'll put links to his YouTube channel. He's done a lot of interviews there. And then also this EpsteinJustice.com. People get involved. Share this stuff. Share this interview. Get the word out. I mean, we can affect change through information and knowledge and through this type of exposure, so it doesn't happen again. A lot of women's lives are ruined. There's missing girls. There's missing babies, guys. A lot of these people have PTSD. A lot of these women.
All of them. If you were trafficked by Jeffrey Epstein, you have PTSD.
You're traumatized. They're all traumatized.
It's unavoidable.
I keep watching, and new names keep popping up. I was watching Soft White Underbelly, an interview guy, another victim. Like, I never saw her. I didn't see her back in 2020 or 2019. So there's just so many people victimized, ruined lives. People who, like Giuffre is a perfect example. Like, some of these people have given up. I mean, the consequences and after effects are like horrible. And let's put an end to it. This is about our civilization, just like Nick said. It really goes to our culture and civilization. Do we want to address this and expose it and prosecute people, or want to look the other way and then let these people? The Trump administration is the Epstein network. They're all over there. Lutnick and all these guys are all in the files, and Kushner too. So we don't want that to happen in the future. But Nick Bryant, thanks so much. Thanks for all the comments too. We had 230 live listeners. Everybody's praising you and your work. So you got a lot of kind comments and sentiments from the chat. So thanks, chat. And thanks, Nick Bryant. I'll put a link to Epstein Justice. Thanks so much.
Thanks, William. Take care.
You too.